through each one individually because they all differ slightly, even though it's the same idea for them all. So I'll do half of it and then I'll pass over to Caitlin to do the next half. Um, so generally, well, for all of the Scottish ones, it's either MMI or panels. So MMI is multiple mini interviews, and that is when there's normally between 4 and 8 stations, but it really depends university to university. And it they're normally quite short, so maybe between 5 and 10 minutes, but it depends on how long you're at each station for. So, like, if you're at 4 stations, they're more likely to be slightly longer. 8 stations, probably closer to 5 minutes. Um, each station generally has a theme, whether it's one statement they might have already looked at your personal statement and they'll ask you questions on that. One might be ethics, one might be communication, one might be role play. Again, it just varies. It's generally a new person at every station, which is quite good because if one goes really badly, then you can just start again with someone else. It doesn't matter. Um, and it might be quite difficult, but you should try and think of them as separate. If one doesn't go well, you think, okay, well, that's one tiny part of the interview. If I do well in the others, it doesn't matter, so I'm not going to let this affect me. Um, the one thing about MMI stations is that obviously you're in a shorter amount of time, so you're sort of trying to impress fairly quickly. So like you just need to be aware of the fact that you you just want to try and be concise about what you're saying. If you have some points that you want to get to, try and get to them and then expand on them just so that you make sure that you've said everything that you need to say. For panels, it's a fairly similar setup. The only real difference is that you don't move around. There's normally 2 or 3 examiners who will interview you for the full duration, which I think is quite good because it sort of lets you build up a bit of a rapport and relationship with them, which you don't really get to do if you're only spending 5 minutes with someone. Um, and it's normally around 20 to 30 minutes, but it might be a bit longer. And generally, there are still sections within the interview, so they would still be like, this is a personal statement section. It's just that it's not official. So I think the main thing to remember is that they're essentially the same thing. It's just a different setup. They don't expect you to know different things for an MMI than they do for a panel. You're just they're both assessing the same qualities, and it's the same preparation really. So now onto the specific medical schools. Glasgow this year their interviews are over Zoom, and this is a panel that's split into 2 sections. So the first one is much more focused on you, and they will ask about that would be when they would ask about personal statement or why do you want to be a doctor and questions like that that you can sort of back up with examples of qualities that you have. And the second one is ethics based, and they provide you with 2 scenarios, and you have to pick one and then discuss with the panel anything you feel is relevant. And they will ask you follow up questions on that. Um, my personal tips for Glasgow is that be personal. I think they're a university that they really like to have examples of qualities. So if you say like, "Oh, I'm really good at communication," they will really like it if you can give a sort of insightful backup to that, an example where you showed it. Be friendly as well. I found my Glasgow interview very sort of conversational and relaxed, and I know that really depends on the who you're being interviewed by, but I think that it's if you're sort of personable and just quite friendly, it can be quite a relaxed one. Um, and I think for the ethics one, my main tip for that would be to try and structure it. So the way that I did it for interviews, it's using the pillars and like autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, and then talking about like consent and capacity as well. I just think that that's a really good sort of outline and structure to sort of help you hit all the marks. And I think it's one that the universities like as well because it shows that you're sort of you can be reflective about stuff. So the next one is Dundee, and I think they are having interviews in person this year. Um, they are an MMI format, so that's 5 scenarios and stations, and you have different examiners at each. They have a big focus on communication skills and like your ability to work in a team and personal values. Um, they have like they're quite practical as well, like they might have you up and doing things. So my tips for that is to not let a bad station throw you off and try and sort of stay in the present. I remember one of my Dundee ones, there was quite a tricky question and I was sort of, oh, that was not very nice, but you just have to try and shake it off and keep going because ultimately it doesn't, that person's not going to know what you say for the rest of them, so it doesn't really matter. I think taking time between the stations to properly read everything is really important. It seems silly, but you might be sort of so focused on being like, oh, I need to get to the next one, that taking a sort of, I think it's normally about 90 seconds that you get to read the brief, and it's always really short, so it's plenty of time, but just sort of taking a deep breath and sort of thinking, okay, maybe how am I going to structure this, or and then for Dundee, you don't need any prior medical knowledge, but it can be quite good to have sort of a general idea of sort of current events so that you can just back it up with examples. If you're asked about something, then you can say, "Oh, I read this about this," and I think that that's something that they like. So for the final three, I'm going to pass over to Caitlin.
Hello. So hopefully you can hear me, possibly see me. So I'm a third year at Glasgow, and I'm going to be moving on to talk about the interviews at Edinburgh. So I'm pretty sure that Edinburgh interviews are in person this year, and you get invited for a day at the school where essentially you go and do your interview, and then after you get like a tour around the school, you get to meet other applicants, which is quite nice. So part of the assessment day includes a group presentation, which is about half an hour long. So you will be analysed for your critical thinking skills, your teamwork skills, and then your presenting skills. And then an MMI style interview of 3 stations, which are 12 minutes each. So obviously these are quite long stations, which you can see as an advantage or a disadvantage. And the questions that they're going to be asking you in the interview are specifically tailored to fit with the NHS core values, which is a document that they've actually listed on their website, and you can download it and have a read of it there. So my tips for this uni would definitely be to familiarise yourself with that document, as well as the course structure and unique aspects. Know the trainee doctor career pathway. That's a typical question that gets asked. So know how long like medical school takes, and then your foundation training, and then specialty training, so on and so forth. And then Edinburgh is quite an academic school. They have a whole research department. They're very, very big on medical academia. So I would definitely have a look at some recent research or advancements in medicine that you can talk about.
I'm not sure why it's not moving. Hold on. There we go.
Okay, so Aberdeen, the interview is weighted 50% of your application. So at the end of the day, for this school, it's good if you have a day where you're not having a good interview, you don't feel that great after your interview, it's only 50% of the application. They are doing in-person interviews, MMI, 6 stations, 5 minutes each, which is a very, very short time. And they do role play stations. I think you will get 1 or 2 role play stations. They are very informative on their website about how an MMI runs in their school, and they also have published videos that you can watch with examples of MMIs, which is really, really useful. So I definitely have a look at that. And they also examine you on your interpersonal skills and ability to build rapport and relationships during the role play stations. So my top tips for this university would definitely be to familiarise yourself with the rural medicine aspect, because Aberdeen, that is something that is very unique to Aberdeen, and they might ask you specifically about it, or it could be something that you can use to your advantage and bring up yourself, and have a look at what the difference is between rural medicine and city medicine. is, and kind of that's a really good talking point to have. I would definitely practice role play if you've not done that before, like with a friend or family member, because I think the first few times you do it, it's a bit awkward because you both know that, I suppose, it's not a real situation. So it's definitely good to practice that. And I would read up about the GMC and their role in the medical profession, because Aberdeen is quite typical for asking about things like the regulatory bodies that the NHS are involved in. So the GMC, the MDU, things like that. And lastly is St Andrews Medical School. So how they mark the interview is they'll take your interview score and your SJT from your UCAT, and then they rank all of the students and allocate offers that way. They will run an MMI style interview with 6 stations and 6 minutes each. And they're also quite big on role play stations as well. And they also do abstract reasoning stations. So getting you to go through a puzzle or building blocks and getting you to go through something that's quite abstract, like the abstract reasoning section of your UCAT, and applying that situation to medicine. The interviews will be in person if you're from the UK, and then overseas students will have online interviews. And the thing about St Andrews is that they have a big focus on wanting to see you utilize your skills rather than being able to talk yourself up, which is, again, you can see that as an advantage or a disadvantage. And they have a big focus on empathy and understanding of ethics. So as Jess said for a previous school, and as Amy was talking about earlier, you should definitely familiarize yourself with the 4 pillars of ethics and practice applying them to scenarios as well. I would definitely practice on building rapport and your communication skills, and have some examples ready to talk about as well when you're thinking of relating things back to medicine. But the most important thing for me and Jess is that you need to be confident in yourself, play to your strengths, know like what you're good at, what you're not good at. We were literally talking about our own interviews while we were preparing for this, and finding, if you've got a story that you know that you want to talk about, find a way to bring that into your interview, find a way to fit that in. And most importantly, like, stay calm. And that's good luck from both of us.